Can I now please ask our first panellist to come to the front as I'm introducing you? Moderator Martin Brackenbury is an ICRT Global Director, former Travel and Tourism Director, Professor of Nottingham University and advisor to the UN Tourism Organization. Matt, if I can ask you to come to one of the seats as well. Oddný Arnarsdóttir took over as head of Visit Iceland in April this year. She's worked for the Tourist Board for 7 years, including in North America, UK, Germany and Spanish markets. Oddný also sits on the board of the Nordic Tourism Collective, has a BA in Political Science, Philosophy and Economics, and an MA in International Law and Settlement of Disputes, hopefully none here today. And our final panellist is Tim Williamson, Joint Managing Director of Responsible Travel, which he joined in 2014 as Customer Director. Tim also worked for Monarch Airlines, TUI UK, and acted as an ABTA board member. He is the co-founder of Development Squared, a Swazi business mentoring organisation. Over to you.
I want to set the scene. We want to discuss how, in different ways, to mainstream responsible tourism. And responsible tourism, of course, has had a long period of gestation. And I was looking up, before coming here, Jos Krimmendorf, my hero at the time, talking in Expo 92 in Seville, and I quote what he said, in simple terms, sustainable tourism is tourism which is environmentally and socially acceptable, or to put it in a better way, responsible. He finished up in the first paragraph, at first glance this would seem to be an impossibility, almost like making a square out of a circle. So he recognised then the difficulties for responsible tourism, but we still keep going with the launch of ICRT Global today. And I'm most encouraged by some of the things which have already been said today, particularly by Matt just now. So you've been introduced by Debbie to Matt, Tim and Oddný, and between them they will provide different perspectives on how to embed responsible tourism thinking and practice so people and organisations make better, more informed choices. And I'll start, if I may, with Matt, who has just presented to us. Matt, I think easyJet Holidays was formed in 2019, is that right? So it's an incredibly short time ago, and you've been astonishingly successful in carrying 2.5 million people on holiday in 2023. How do you see the journey and the obstacles to maintaining responsible tourism within the context that you have talked about just now of sharing knowledge, collaboration, value of partnerships and driving change and rapid implementation?
Thanks. Where to start? So some of this, as I said, without repeating myself too much, this is down to business choices, right, and business decisions that organisations choose to make. And that's, for us, started way back when we were forming the business in 2019. Things like our overseas support model. So the way we support customers when they're in destination is through local DMCs, destination management companies. That means we employ local people that are hugely passionate and hugely knowledgeable about the area that they grew up in. We recently did some research across all of our DMCs, and 99% of respondents identified as being local to the area that they worked in. Now, not only is that hugely beneficial from a customer experience point of view, because someone that's lived somewhere for 30 years is going to know far more than anyone that reps there on a kind of 8 months a year basis could ever know. When things get really tricky for customers and they need to go to a hospital or speak to the local police or whatever, those people know the way those processes work inside out. But those people are also really passionate about talking about things that go on in their local environment. So it's really important for a better customer experience. It's better. So when we talk about winning for our customers, tick. Winning for our destinations, tick, because it's money and local employment that stays in the locale. It's not then coming back to the UK for the winter. It's also winning for our shareholders, because it's a much cheaper way of operating than it is to have the complexity and the overhead of thousands of reps like a traditional tour operator would have, and then bringing them back and then sending them back out and retraining and all of that good stuff. So one small example about how changing the status quo in how mainstream, large-scale tour operators work can win for multiple stakeholder groups. So some of this needs to be thinking big, right, about how can you reimagine the way these things are done. Because it would have been easy for us to say, well, let's just copy tried and tested and well-performing existing models. But then you need to also, I think, go from macro to micro and understand who are the people that we're partnering with. Who are the hotel accommodation providers that we're partnering with, recognising that within there we've got huge global chains that we work with, and we've got much smaller owner-managed properties. And what sustainability means to them and responsible tourism means to them are very different things. So just like it is with customers, particularly when we are a predominantly outsourced model that relies on our supply chain, understanding that supply chain and tailoring your message accordingly to understand what their drivers are is really, really important.
Matt, if one takes that overall message and then thinks of it in different countries, do you find that you have to adapt your approach, say, between Spain or Morocco or Greece or Turkey?
So less so with accommodation providers, more so actually when working with the destinations, because there are different drivers from different destination management organisations. So what the Spaniards are driving is slightly different to what the Greeks are driving. So it's how do we work with those different DMOs in order that we can understand what some of the local challenges are and the role that a large mainstream, large-scale operator like us can play. But it's also important to think about the smaller destinations that are still incredibly important to us, like Iceland, where we have been able to use the strength of our airline to open up alternative destinations. So how can we reduce some of the flows to Reykjavik, for example, but still allowing people to experience the wonders and the beauty of Iceland with places like ICRT, which featured in the presentation. So there's a whole range of things, from kind of upstream things that are within our gift, things that we can work with our airline on, and then things that we need to flex when working with different destinations.
Last question I want to ask you at this stage is that you've talked about hotels and destination management organisations, but you've not really talked about central local governments. Do you see them within the sort of regulatory context as important partners with you?
100%. Because if we want to challenge some of the bigger things, like let's take extended seasons as an example. Extended seasons is something where everyone says, do you know what, if we could reduce some of those peaks in July and August and expand the season, that would be one of the silver bullets that we're looking for. And we can try that, right? And we can play our part in that through our airline operating seasons earlier, summer season earlier, and finishing later. But on its own, that isn't enough. Because customers might be attracted by lower price points 1 year, but then if they get there and the rest of the infrastructure is still shut down for winter, well, they're not going to go back and try that again next year. So that's a good example, I think, of where we need the private sector and the public sector to really be working hand in hand, because everyone can contribute different things. We can't contribute meaningfully to making bars, shops, restaurants open in March instead of May. We can bring people to the destination, but it's going to be of limited effectiveness, I think, until all of the key actors come together and we end up with a harmonised plan for, in this example, extended seasons. Because what an incredible opportunity. There's a reason that people say, do you know what, if we could extend the summer, start it earlier, finish it later, it would solve or create more opportunities. It would. But it's hard. And it needs joined up efforts across public, private sector in order to realise some of those opportunities.
Thanks, Matt. Tim, I think you joined Responsible Travel, an online travel agency and publisher, in 2013. So you've been with them now for around 10 years. The name Responsible Travel evokes your approach. Has it worked with customers, travel suppliers and accommodation?
I'd like to think it's worked. We've been going 20 odd years, so I think we must be doing something right. And I think with Harold and Justin Francis, who started it together, the vision was to show that you could do travel differently, and more than that, to show that you could make money. We're unashamedly a profit-based business, but that you can sell holidays that are kinder to local communities and to nature. And I think when I look around at other businesses and I see their websites and I see their responsible and sustainable policies, I think, yes, we have created something that, and the idea was always to be copied. Justin's background was body shop, and Anita and Gordon provided the seed funding, and the model with the body shop was always about prove to the world that you can make money out of cosmetics that don't need to be tested on animals. And we applied the same principles to responsible travel to prove that you can actually make money and sell really exciting holidays. And I think what's been weird is that we always screened for responsible tourism. We screen every partner, it's about 400 tour operators. We screen every trip, there's about 6,000. But we only screen them for responsible tourism. We were surprised when we started doing customer reviews that they were so amazing. So there must be something in this. And so we've not only been selling responsible holidays, but we've been selling bloody good holidays as well. And I think there is something in this, what we call the win-win. When you open up when you pay a local destination partner well, when you focus on the living wage, there must be something in that they open up to customers in such a way that they don't to the big bus that's going past. And that generates amazing scores, amazing satisfaction. So that, I'd love to say that was intentional. That wasn't. That was an accident, but it was a nice accident. But I think I would say we succeeded, but I don't want to talk about it. We got to the pandemic and we pivoted the company completely at that point.
Given that you have been in business for 20 years and you've been profitable, generally speaking, presumably not through COVID, but are the lessons more generally applicable? And if so, what are the lessons which are generally applicable?
The lessons in what way?
Well, the lessons of the message which your name evokes of responsible tourism.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to think it's demand-led. I'd love to think that people are searching for our responsible holidays, our eco holidays, our green holidays, but we know that from Google searches that simply isn't true. So I think so much of this sector has to be pushed, and we still have to push, and we have to create bloody good holidays that customers really want, and by the way, they are responsible. I was at a travel conference where I heard Gary Wilson from easyJet Holidays talking very well about easyJet, and next to him was the CEO of Love Holidays, who said customers don't want it. We've surveyed it. He doesn't know how to do surveys, which is a bit disappointing. But he said customers don't want it. Customers won't pay an extra few pounds for this. And I said, you've missed the point completely here. This is us. This is us. As a tourism sector, this is, it clearly sounds like it's something that's resonated from the easyJet board, and it resonates from our board, and I'm sure it resonates from lots of yours too. We have to drive it, and I still think we're in that driving stage where you can't expect the customers to come and shake you and say, I want this holiday over that one because it's got more responsible criteria. So I think we're at that stage at the moment. I wouldn't say we've gone beyond that.
So the conclusion is we really have to drive the change.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let me ask Oddný, because thank you for coming. You've, I think, got rather more than 200,000 visitors to Iceland every year.
2 million.
2 million? 2 million?
Yes.
Gosh, I thought it was a much smaller number. I know it only vicariously as friends visit for fly fishing every year at colossal expense, unbelievably expensive, and return with very happy memories. Now,
Who said money doesn't buy happiness? There you go. Yeah.
So you've got 2 million people, goodness. How do you see balancing tourism flows with the mainstreaming of responsible tourism in Iceland?
Yes. Well, first of all, I would like to address maybe the number of visitors coming to Iceland. Back in 2010 and before that, Iceland had about 450 to 500,000 visitors on a yearly basis during 2.5 months, right? Then we had a growth period until 2018, where we saw numbers going up, and in 2018 reaching a peak of 2.3 million visitors. I know these numbers sounds like, wow, this is over-tourism in a nutshell. But what we saw and what was quite amazing is in 2018, 65% of the growth was out of season. So we changed from being a 2.5 month destination in 2010 to a year-round destination in 2018, and that's where we're at. And what we also saw is that they were not only visiting the south and Reykjavik, the capital area, and the south actually holds the Golden Circle, which is one of the kind of tourist routes that is very well known for Iceland. We were seeing people going around the country into the lesser visited areas. So there was, in these 8 years, there's a lot of changes in Iceland, right? And almost from the get-go of creating Visit Iceland in 2010, we thought about responsible tourism. We of course we live in a country that has fragile nature, small local communities, and we thought, well, this should be something that we want everybody to benefit from, but without leaving traces behind, really. So this is kind of what we did. So what Matt was saying earlier, that it needs to be government, but it also needs to be local, and we have been very blessed with being able actually to work very closely, the public and the private sector in tourism. And from the marketing perspective, which Visit Iceland handles mainly, is we have a lot of kind of tools for tourists, for our visitors, that is set on the agenda that the government has for tourism. So we have a tourism policy, and we build on that with regions. So we have a carbon footprint calculator for people. You can offset your carbon footprint. We have counters in the 50 most visited destinations in Iceland, so you can actually see at what time and what day of the week it's most busy. You can actually plan around it. We have a map of charging stations around the country for those who want to drive by themselves. And then we have, for example, the Icelandic pledge. We were the first destination to come out with a pledge for the visitors, where we kind of give them 10 guiding lines, we can say, to follow when Visiting Iceland, put out in a bit of a humorous way, but with clear education behind it. And then we have, for example, with the government, the Tourist Site Protection Fund, which is for maintaining and development of the tourist sites. So there are many ways that we work together on the public and the private sector. And then, it's very important for a destination like Iceland to be able to distribute the tourists around the country. So like Matt mentioned, with easyJet flying now into Akureyri during winter time only, right? So from November to March to the north of Iceland is very, very important. So we have the infrastructure already built up, I think, in Iceland, which gave easyJet also the trust in the destination to be able to do exactly this. And they added a route for this year. So now they're flying from 2 destinations in the UK directly into the north. So for us, this is very important as well. So this means we can still have the destination built up even further and even more. And this is benefiting the local communities. So it's a win-win there.
Did you talk about the hotels and influence from your perspective you have on hotels and the way in which they might or might not practice responsible tourism practices and make decisions which favour responsible tourism, rather along the lines of what Matt was talking about?
Well, that would, we maybe at Visit Iceland, since we kind of work equally for all the stakeholders in Iceland, we wouldn't take one part out of really kind of the... Yeah. But in Iceland, we're also kind of, we can say, well, as you might know, we're blessed with a lot of geothermal energy, for example. So, for example, the hotels can reduce their kind of carbon footprint, we can say as well. And most of the hotels in Iceland are locally owned chains or boutique hotels. And when we get the international chains, these are usually on the boutique side from the chains, hotel chains. So, we've been able to kind of, we can say build accommodations around the country that are about Iceland and for Iceland, we can say, right? We, the hotels, the DMCs, tour operators, most of them have certifications, Green Key or the Swan or the Icelandic that we have specifically for Iceland. So yeah, we could say, they strive. We're all kind of striving into the same direction for responsible tourism.
But do you have, you talk about certification, but do you have kind of guidelines which are helpful for the different suppliers and sites and so on for behaviour?
Yes, well, as I mentioned, the Iceland Pledge, and that is more on the consumer or for the visitor side. Then for the local tour operators or hotels, then we have our own Icelandic certification, which can be applied for hotels or for tour operators or activity operators. So it depends a bit on what field in tourism you're in, kind of which one which kind of what is called the difficult level, we can say they need to kind of go through to get their certification. But then many of them also, as I say, have international certifications as well. So I think for Iceland, I think we can say, beside the point that all the local tour operators need to have licenses as well and need to be registered. So I think when visiting Iceland, you can be, well, we can say 99% certain that you are working with a trained guide, certificate, accommodation or activity or with a DMC. That is, yeah.
Very good. Have you got a final comment, any of you, about the strategic focus that you think that ICRT would pursue, given that we are launching today and we are obviously in very early stages of when we know what we want to do, but is there a strategic focus that you think we should concentrate upon?
Yeah, I'm happy to comment. I was on the train up with the Green MP for Brighton, and I've heard her predecessor talk about the big things that we can do. And I also sat in on another speech by someone who said this exactly the same message. So when I talk about us leading, I mean ICRT, I mean us as businesses, and there were two things that they've talked about, and we've added on a third, that we have to lead as businesses, and if we do that, then we have a chance of maybe slowing down some of the climate heating, which is what our businesses has absolutely pivoted to focusing on since the pandemic. The first thing she talked about is that we live in we're a lucky country in the UK where we can choose our tariff, and we can move towards renewable energy at the flick of a phone call or an email. So switching your energy supplier to renewable. So the second thing she's talked about, and again, these are for businesses and also for individuals, is to change your bank. And that's something we've just done this year. Painful process, because we're the first travel company. We left Barclays, who are the biggest investor in fossil fuels, but let's be honest, they did get us through the pandemic as well, with the amount of loans we took from them. So I have sort of a mixed feeling with them. But we've moved to Unity Trust, and we're the first travel company to move to Unity Trust as a bank. They're a fantastic business-only bank, and we can do it, and we're encouraging all of our staff to start moving away. And the third thing which you can do is with your pension funds, and again, we're doing that with our staff, and encourage them to move away from anything that is anything to do with any investment in petrochemicals. And I think is something that ICRT can also lead as well, because that's purely about education. No one thinks about it, but it is. If you're going to do a big thing, the Green MPs were getting quite annoyed at the sort of micro focus. That actually we have the power to do some very, very big things as individuals and as travel companies. Let's go on and do them. And those are the three things she talked about. So I would say, is there any way of mirroring that in training and education?
Thanks. Have you got a comment?
Yes, so unsurprisingly for me, it would be to look at the education, collaboration and rapid implementation. So let's not try and shoot for utter perfection. Pace is more important. So how can we get on with the education programme, trying something somewhere and seeing how that goes, rather than trying to get the platinum plated version that will work for all different stakeholder groups all over the world, because spoiler alert, it probably doesn't exist. So how can we find the one thing that we can just start with, in which geography, with which target audience, with clear objectives, and just see where it goes? Because a path will take us in a number of different potential ways, but they're all paths forward. To sit and try and articulate every vision statement, every objective, every geography, every audience will make zero impact. We're better to make some impact somewhere, test and learn, and see how we go.
Yeah. Do you want to add to that?
Just since, as an outsider, and what I found is just what is always very important is to have the right stakeholders always at the table, and to get the feedback a bit, on the actions and thoughts, and kind of get the the locals and the communities and the government and the tourism companies and airline, kind of learn from everybody and listen to different voices, because that is in the end when you have a consensus, where you want to go, and this is what I think can help it move a bit faster along the way.
Good. Thank you very much. I've been signalled that it's the end of our session. Thank you very much, Matt, Tim and Oddný. Thank you.